Yo guys, how you doing? Today we're gonna have a pretty special guest. His name is Paul Linn. Many of you heard about him for sure already. Special in the sense that he himself is still a beginner. I decided to talk with Paul because in his just 2 years long career, he did unbelievable things in the sport. The world is really small and I was there when Paul stepped to the table for the first time. In few seconds we all knew he's gonna be one of the best very soon. I never met anyone more talented than he is, which doesn't always have to be a good thing. But Paul is a smart guy and he's training hard to be better at every tournament. He's an absolute workhorse and you never see him without a smile on his face. I believe in the next couple of years we're gonna see him at the top of the world rankings. But for today, let's just give him a few questions about his training. How often you train on the table?
How often on the table?
Yep.
Right now, once a week. The most I've ever done is twice. I just feel like that's right now recovery-wise, and based on a 4-hour practice once a week is about all the elbow can take.
Yeah. Okay. How long it usually takes your table session?
I just got back from practice today, so I was there for 3.5, 4 hours,
But
about 4 hours
that's
with
like
light break.
that's your usual time, or
Yeah,
yeah.
if he goes to practice or if I go to a big one, it's almost always 3 to 4 hours. Try to switch, try to do my best and stay active as much as I can. Kind of like Devin, try to switch from arm to arm and get grip up with everybody at the practice.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of my next question. How is it looking on your table session? Do you have a specific days for hook, top roll, or you doing some special exercises, or you just killing yourself with your bodies?
Depending on where I go, I do a lot of traveling for practice. So depending on where I'm going really depends on what my focus is. When I go down to Maryland with Kenny Smith and Dave and those guys, and they have a lot of super heavies and guys with a lot of inside power and a lot of strap. And so there, I work with Barry Hurst on a strap game and then a lot of inside pulling with Kenny and the big guys. So really those practices for me are predominantly going to be more like a workout and a power session to really get my arm work, like almost like a physical training session.
Yep.
I go work with Storm. We'll spend about 2.5 hours in the gym just doing a basic workout along with a bunch of different stuff, cupping, pronation, supination, all that stuff. And then we'll finish up with table time. But he and I is predominantly drilling, which is drilling in different positions, back pressure against the cup and static holds. We finish every practice up with 30 and 60-second static holds like you and Marcio did. So you guys.
Yeah, that's the great way to end the practice. How many times do you train in between those sessions in the week? I mean, in the gym, at home, or in the park, wherever you train?
Right. So I came from a strength background with my background in sports and I actually have a master's in exercise physiology. So I've been kind of dedicated throughout my life to just general strength and through the core lifts and just basic training. So I had that base coming in. And there's part of me that my OCD won't allow me to get away from that.
Yeah.
So I'm still training 5 days a week with a split body routine just for general strength, your traditional style of lifting. But I've incorporated in every single one of my days on the split body, basically a superset where I'm doing one form of arm wrestling training after each set of my general lift. So because of the volume that I have to do to keep up with all of that, I've broken it up to twice a day. So I'm blessed enough to be able to lift over my work break at work, and we have a program where we actually get a little paid time to train. So I have my training session in like it's more of a commercial style gym where I have machines and everything. I do all my hammer strength stuff that I can get in there, and I superset all my arm wrestling specific stuff over my lunch. And then at 3 p.m., I go back to where I run the strength program, and we have more of a grimy power rack style powerlifting facility kind of. So I'll get all my core lifts in there, and then I have as much time as I want in the evening to finish up all the arm wrestling specific stuff. So I've kind of broken it out. I'm not a guy who follows a program and writes everything down. Everything, the way I split my workouts up and the way I change and phase them is really just all in my head. Storm's very similar. We don't really log much. But everything we do, we try and complement. So if Monday's chest and tries, I make sure that my focus then is on cup,
Yep.
because everything I'm doing is pushing. So the cup and the strain on the hand won't really detract from my ability to go heavy in my core lifts. And then if Tuesday's back and buys, then that'll be a session where obviously I'll do fat grips and thick handles on every pull I do. But then I'll focus on my superset back and forth with pronation and supination, towel work, karate belt, bands, all of it. So every set that I do for a regular core lift, I have another set of an arm wrestling training thing. So usually, if I'm targeting rep ranges of, like 30 to 50 reps, I usually wind up with about 1,000 reps of arm wrestling specific stuff when it's done.
Yeah. Okay. So you have it down to the science, man. And what do you feel? What about recovery? If you are training this much, what about your recovery? Do you feel good?
Well, I mean, I think I've built up a pretty good base as far as the strength training stuff, that I don't really get sore too much. So there's been certain lifts that I've had to back away from. I no longer do any flat bench press or any barbell bench pressing. So I've really gravitated towards all dumbbell work where I can control my range of motion, shorten the range of motion a little bit for the shoulders. Because early starting on my sub scaps, both of them got really flared up from side pressure. So I've gone completely away from the barbell stuff and into dumbbell and hammer strength stuff. So the rep ranges, even for that, now I've got, just because I'm getting older, I don't do 1 reps that much, max exertion. So I'm really about 20 reps. So, if I'm doing flat dumbbells, I'll shoot for a total like rep number. If I'm doing the hundreds, I want 100 reps of the hundreds, and I'll try and get there in as few sets as it takes. So, and then with the arm wrestling stuff, like if I had a hard practice, like I just had a hard practice today. So tomorrow when I do all my cupping, it's all going to be sets of 50, blood flow really, really light, to try and get some blood into the tendons and breathe. Then when I go back to cupping on Wednesday, that's when I'll actually do the heavy stuff on the wrist wrench, the heavy stuff on the multi-spinner, and all the static holds. Once I've got a couple days to recover.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it, man. Okay, you basically answered this. I wanted to ask you if your training is structured, but you basically just said it. But would you recommend a beginner to write down the training plan and set down their goals?
Right, and that brings me to the point that I meant to make anyway. The fact that you're doing this video session is awesome. It's something that I would have loved like early on, because when I was finding my way. So there's been a lot of guys that have reached out, like to me personally and other guys I know, asking for exactly for what you're doing right now. So I think that's perfect. And I've talked to a bunch of people, and there's a lot of people, in my area in the team have asked me like, oh, can you write me a program? Yep. And my response to that is I'd be glad to sit down with you for an hour and talk to you and help you write your own program. I've never been a big believer in complete standardization. So I think you have structure, but I think as a beginner, taking a look at what you need to improve on and which arm wrestling specific things you have the ability to do based on tools and gym and everything else. And that's also incorporating that into how much background do you have in the gym anyway. So if you don't go to the gym at all, then maybe you might want to go to somebody and get a program and get a couple training sessions to figure that out, and then incorporate your arm wrestling specific stuff in. But I think personally, everybody has to have their own setup. Like when I first started out and came up to practice with you guys a couple years ago, my wrist and hand was just so bad, and it got exposed. And I remember everybody, you have to strengthen your hand and wrist up. So for like 3 to 4 months after that, that was my primary focus. Like, so for me, it was like, okay, I'm just going to find a way to work all this wrist wrench stuff, all this cupping, all this fat grip stuff, and really shore my wrist and fingers up. And I'm not going to move on beyond that until I feel comfortable with my cup and my hand strength. Then after that, you reevaluate and figure, hey, how do I want to pull? Because I think that's another one of the big things. When you're starting off, you don't necessarily know what you are. Are you a top roller? Are you a hooker? What is your technique? Are you a presser?
You have to find yourself in there. Yeah.
Right. I think if you have something that you're naturally good at, I think it's best to probably focus on the stuff that you're not good at.
Yep.
So if you hook with your hands deep, focus on it. If you got a big fast top roll, then work on bar. I mean, that's just kind of the way I see it, I think. Your first couple tournaments, you're going to go with your best move anyway, whatever you're comfortable with. It's going to take you time to get versatile. But I think you can get versatile in your training before you get versatile on the field.
Yep. Would you recommend for a beginner to train more compound moves or just the specific moves for arm wrestling?
I mean, this is all opinion based. I'm a strong believer in an all around strength base. So like if you're coming into arm wrestling and you don't train in the gym and you're a pretty good arm wrestler, you got a big strong hand, maybe you work manual labor and your hand's really, really dominant. I think that the compound movements or the core lifts and general strength is extremely important for arm wrestling. If I didn't have that base, I don't think I would have been able to progress as quickly. So I think, and a lot of guys that come into the sport who have genetically big hands, a lot of times I think that their general strength, maybe it's lat, maybe it's delt, maybe it's pec, whatever it may be, bicep strength. I think that those strengths are much easier to develop, especially when you're untrained, and the gains come so much quicker. So I think, obviously, it's all about balance, and you should be doing the arm wrestling specific stuff. But I think if you're a beginner and you're not training in the gym, you're not maximizing your potential as far as like where are you going to go in the sport. There's so many facets to it, obviously, with all the different technique and everything, all the stuff you can learn mentally. But nothing can replace general strength.
Yep.
And then obviously when you have general strength and you also have the hand and wrist strength and you're totally connected, that's I think when you really become dangerous.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have your just few favorite exercises, or you're switching them?
Well, I definitely have favorites, and obviously, I'm a big believer in Devin's philosophy of cupping and everything starting from your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So, personally, I love the wrist wrench. I know it's a basic tool and everything, but I love for cupping. I love the wrist wrench with 3 holes and the ability to use an upward angle cup and a bottom angle cup. And Devin's multi-spinner because it's so versatile. By moving the strap wherever you want, you can target any angle of cupping. So for me, I think my favorite tool and my favorite exercise overall that I would recommend to a beginner would definitely be the wrist wrench for cupping. Wrist wrench, multi-spinner, and obviously fat grip and everything. So if you're not doing pull-ups, if you're not doing low rows, if you're not doing dumbbell rows, anything like that, I think every beginner needs to be doing at a bare minimum the pulls, like you did your demo on pull-ups and just general pulls in general. I think that stuff is so important, and when you add a thick handle to that and a false grip, you're not only going to get stronger in your large muscle groups, but you're also going to work on that tendon strength, that cup, and that finger strength along with it. So cupping I think is everything. It doesn't matter how strong you are, if your cup and fingers can't sustain your back pressure or side pressure, you just lose your hand and lose the match no matter what. So I think back to what you said, I think just fat grips, wrist wrench, and the multi-spinner or whatever cupping tool you like best. That to me has given me the most gains early on. As I progressed along, I train everything. I rise, sink. I train everything down to my fingers individually with eagle loops. So I'll do pulls with single fingers. I do a bunch of different things, but if you had to say what are your favorites for training your fingers, I like the country crush with the blocks, the flat finger for shelving, because you can add weight and it'll really, really challenge. I like a 4x4 block. I do rows with a 4x4 block with an eye hook in the middle, so I'm pulling through my fingers and keeping my cup. For pronation, I definitely like the karate belt, and I know a lot of guys pronate differently through their thumb and all the different things. But I go through my thumb and through my top knuckle, set it different, and I've actually gravitated more towards, rather than opening up and being in that defensive pronated position and turning the whole way over, I've started training more of a lock pronation with a strap over the outside of my hand and just letting the weight load on my hand until it fails and opens me up. I've evolved as far as how I'm training some of those things, and I'm really starting to focus on, like I said, all the static motions. So if it's supination, I'll train supination the same way. Bring the strap from an angle here and keep it supinated until it opens me up.
Yep.
So I think early on, pronation, supination, a towel or a belt was a savior for me. And then rising and sinking, I obviously started off just with a basic sledgehammer. And then I transitioned into Lucas Raymond makes a couple different tools and things that I really like. He actually makes a tool that is probably one of my favorite that almost nobody uses. It's a tool that I found on a Devin video, one of his real old ones. Really all it is a thick handle like a PVC pipe. Lucas makes it out of a steel pipe. And all it has is a flat, it's an L-shaped handle with a hole in the end. And he calls it the hook finisher. It's really good for, take the handle way in your hand in a hook position with the L facing the hook, the eye hook out here and the cable up in this angle so that you're in a fully cupped hook position and all you're doing is working on that down pressure, the thumb and pinky down. That one was one that I picked up a couple years into it that I think has made some really good gains for hook pulling.
Okay, what do you think about the half reps? Would you recommend beginners to do the half reps?
Yeah, that's another one. I do both. So I do full reps because I'm still into general strength. I do think that the half reps are definitely valuable for the sport, especially when we're talking, you know, I've done them wrong. You know, I've actually posted videos where I'm not doing them in the most effective way. But you live and you learn. You know, obviously on a preacher curl, like everybody says, if you're flat along the back of your arm on a preacher curl, you're not really engaging that weight until you hit those past 90.
You have to hit the right
so,
angle.
Guys post the videos, and really the leaning forward method of it that Devin does is really what I've started to gravitate towards more. I think that stuff's very important. I also use one of the, I think it was called the perfect curl. All it really is it sits over your chest like this. You can take a easy curl bar, and your elbows sit against that thing, and it forces your elbows in a strict position. I like them, and I like to just take them as heavy as I can go and lean forward with them in that tight position. So I think overall, whether it be hammer curls or dumbbell curls or barbell curls, when I'm training specifically for arm wrestling or for like bicep power, I do half reps definitely, and I do a lot of static holds. I've also transitioned to using that karate belt for basically back pressure. Rather than being supinated, I'll put that belt over the top of my hand to train my rise locked in, and I'll actually half rep in that position, as well as move it down my wrist. So I'll progress from my top knuckle all the way around my hand on it. So it'll top knuckle, second rep will be over to the side, third rep will be around the hand, and each set goes heavier because the further you move back on the arm, the more weight you can handle. And I'll actually work to the point where I'm putting more weight, like as much as I can handle, and having it over my wrist. So I transitioned from focusing on the hand to the arm. And just that position, that static center of the table position is what I'm targeting. So I'll get in that position, put the strap on, and I'll stand there, thumb on my chin, and I'll just try and get it off the ground and keep it there until it opens up. That, I think, has been a big thing. I only started doing them a couple months ago. That's a Travis Bagent thing. Travis does it with a band, a big heavy band.
Yeah.
And yeah, he does. He walks away with a band on his chin. I don't like the bands quite as much, so I like the free weight feel.
Yeah, I saw him pull the track in Game of
Yes.
Life. Yeah. Okay. Next question. If you had a new beginner in your club, what would you tell him to learn first? Would you recommend him to train just one technique or train all the things?
Early on, you know, when you just start, you don't know what you don't know. So, I mean, I asked so many questions, and it took so long for things to sink in. I remember even asking you a ton of questions. You tell me a bunch of things, and I'm only getting, I might have taken 10% away.
Yeah,
so
it's hard for a new guy. It's hard to see those things on the table.
Right. You don't know. So early on, if you're going to go and compete and get experience on the table, which I'm a strong believer in, I believe, you know, go to as many tournaments as you can, pull as many weight classes as you can. As long as you're pulling safe, get experience on the table. So in those first tournaments, you're not going to know what you're doing, I think. So whatever you feel comfortable with, go with that. And I'm not saying focus on it as far as training goes. Make that a little bit better, you know, and get to where you're comfortable and you feel as you can win matches with the move that you're comfortable with. And as soon as you get comfortable and feel like you've gotten to a point where you feel good about that, then transition to the next thing where you're not comfortable. I know Dave Morocco always talks about, he says he's a big believer in training the hook, and he doesn't hook at all. Yep. He's a top roller. He believes that training the hook will improve your top roll, but training the top roll doesn't necessarily improve the hook. So in a way, that makes a lot of sense to me, because you're getting power, and if you have a good strong hook, you're making your arm stronger. That's only going to help your top roll. So in a way, I'm kind of a believer in that too.
Okay, my last question, Paul. If you could go back in time and give yourself one tip, what would it be?
You mean back? Give myself one?
Yeah, when you started.
That's a good question. I think if I were to go back to my first couple tournaments, I would have prepared myself for losing better. I think, yeah, I'm not. It's like the hardest thing when you're training for, or even once you start training and you're expecting to win and you're hoping to make gains like through the course of like 3 weeks rather than 3 years. Yeah. I don't think mentally I was as prepared for the process early on. My expectations were too high. And I think that's one of the things for a lot of new pullers. You get bit by the bug and you get obsessed by it. And depending on your personality type, you really dedicate a lot of time to it, and you're working really hard. You get to a tournament and you lose a couple matches that you weren't expecting to lose. It can affect you and make you want to quit. That's not really something that I don't really entertain the idea of quitting things. But some people, I think, it struggles for them. So, I mean, I think if I could go back, I would have told myself, hey, nobody's undefeated in this sport. Get ready to lose. And if I'd have had my mind state wrapped around that, I think I would have just been better prepared for the training process, and I think I would have been able to dig into it a little bit faster.
I think that's a really good tip, because a lot of guys have this problem. They stop too soon. Okay, man, that was it. Thank you for your time. Good luck in your next tournament, and see ya, okay?
I hope you get back here to the States soon, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to try.
So I couldn't find the Devin video, but I did speak to him last night. He couldn't find it either. He calls this the L tool. Lucas Raymond manufactures it. He calls it the hook finisher. Like I said, he made it after I found the video of one of Devin's old training videos using it. He made one for me and he sells them now. So basically I just go really, really light, and I try and find the angle that feels best for me to simulate a deep hook and the downward pronation involved in a deep hook. So I take the angle this direction and I let it kind of open my arm up if I was to simulate being in a palm up hook, and then work back down. So the pressure really comes through the pinky, the top knuckle, and the thumb going down. And obviously you can change angles however you want to do it. You don't have to do it in a deep hook. You can do it however you want. But it puts a lot of pressure on the hand, a lot of pressure on the wrist, and it definitely translates, I think, for me. I can feel a difference as far as my downward pronation for a pin in the hook and my downward pronation for a hook defense.